We'd been married for 15 years. 15 years of shared dreams, half-finished dinners, quiet compromises, and a love that started with ambition. We met as interns. Same company, same department, same dreams. Paul was charming, confident, and full of big ideas. I was the quiet one, the planner, the one who turned those ideas into actual numbers that worked. Everyone noticed I was better at the job, everyone except Paul. He noticed, but he never liked it. When his boss was about to promote me, Paul said he'd never forgive himself if I got there first. So I stepped back. I told myself it was love, that supporting him was the same as succeeding together. 15 years later, I finally understood what a mistake that was. That evening was like any other. Paul was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone while the TV filled the room with the dull murmur of a news anchor talking about markets. I was in the kitchen, finishing up some emails for a freelance project, the only kind of work I could find after leaving my career for us. Then his phone buzzed. Once, twice, again. It wasn't unusual. He was always glued to it. But something in the way he smiled made my stomach tighten. When he left the room to grab a drink, the screen lit up again on the counter. I didn't mean to look, truly. But curiosity and that quiet, gnawing instinct that something was wrong, they overpowered me. Last night was unforgettable. Can't wait to see you again, my love. Your Nellie. My fingers went numb. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake, maybe a client, a prank, something explainable. But deep down, I already knew. When he came back into the room, glass of whiskey in hand, I was still staring at the message. "Who's Nellie?" I asked. My voice came out calm, dangerously calm. He froze mid-step. "Excuse me?" I turned the phone toward him. "You left this on the counter." A shadow flickered over his face. Guilt, annoyance, calculation. Then he scoffed. "You're going through my phone now?" I wasn't. The message popped up. He sighed, long and theatrical. "Elena, she's just someone from work. Don't make a scene." "Someone from work who says last night was unforgettable?" My voice cracked on the last word. "How long, Paul?" He rolled his eyes and took a sip of his drink. "Don't start with this drama. God, you've become impossible lately." "Answer me." He set the glass down hard on the table. "You know what your problem is? You've been cold for years. No passion, no excitement. Everything's about bills, schedules, and your stupid medical appointments." The words hit like a slap. "You mean the fertility treatments?" He shrugged, unbothered. "Face it. You can't give me a family. You can't give me what I need. Nellie," he hesitated, but only for effect, "makes me feel alive again." My chest felt tight. "Alive?" I whispered. "Paul, you wouldn't even be where you are if it wasn't for me. Every deal, every report, I stayed up nights helping you. You didn't even understand the numbers until I explained them." He smirked, that familiar, arrogant smirk that I used to find confident. "Oh, come on. You always have to make it about you, don't you? Maybe that's why I needed someone else, someone who doesn't act like she's smarter than everyone." I stared at him, the man I'd once admired, once believed in. "So what? You found someone younger, prettier, easier to impress, and suddenly I'm the problem?" "Maybe I'm just tired of feeling like a failure in my own house," he said, voice rising. "You were supposed to support me, Elena, not compete with me." "I did support you," I said softly. "For 15 years. He shook his head, dismissive. "Then maybe it's time we both admit this marriage is over." Something in me went cold. Not rage. Something quieter, more final. "You're right," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "It is." He blinked, surprised, maybe even a little nervous. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm leaving." "Elena, don't be ridiculous," he scoffed. "Where will you even go? You have nothing. You've been living off my income for years." That smile, smug, confident, that was the last thing I needed to see to finally understand who he really was. "I had something once," I said, "before you asked me to give it up." I walked to the bedroom, packed my purse, laptop, and the small jewelry box my mother left me. Everything else could stay. When I reached the doorway, he called out behind me, "You'll come crawling back, you always do." I turned, met his eyes, and felt the last piece of me that loved him crumble. "I already have," I said quietly. "For 15 years. And I left. The night air was cold, sharp, almost cleansing. Rain had started to fall, blurring the streetlights into long, golden streaks as I walked to my car. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay. When I caught my reflection in the window, I barely recognized the woman looking back. Pale face, wet hair, trembling lips. But there was something fierce in her eyes. For the first time in years, I whispered to myself, "He doesn't get to end my story." And with that, I drove into the rain, away from Paul, away from the life I built around him, and toward whatever waited beyond the wreckage. I spent the first night at a small, cheap hotel near the city center, the kind with humming neon lights and walls that smelled faintly of bleach and loneliness. I lay there, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling while rain tapped against the window. The silence was brutal. 15 years of shared space, and suddenly it was just gone. No sound of Paul typing late at night, no TV echoing through the hallway, no pretense of normal life. Just emptiness. The next morning, I packed what little I had into 2 bags and drove to a friend's apartment. Julia opened the door in her bathrobe, mascara smudged from the night before. "Elena?" She blinked. What happened?" I tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "It's over." She hugged me tight. "You mean, you and Paul?" I nodded. "He's seeing someone. An intern. I caught him." Julia's eyes widened. "Oh my God, that arrogant bastard." She pulled back, her expression softening. "You can stay here as long as you need." I wanted to say thank you, but the words caught in my throat. I'd always been the strong one, the one people came to for help, not the one who needed it. Days blurred together. I started selling jewelry and old clothes online just to cover expenses. My savings were minimal. I'd trusted Paul when he said, "We're a team, no need to keep things separate." He kept the house, the accounts, the life. I kept the memories. I applied for jobs, dozens. Finance roles, assistant positions, anything. But 15 years out of the market was a lifetime. Recruiters smiled politely, said they'd keep my CV on file. None of them called back. One afternoon, I sat on Julia's couch scrolling through rejection emails, my laptop dimly lighting the room, when she came in holding 2 mugs of tea. "Elle," she said softly, "have you thought about calling my cousin, the one who works at Blake & Partners?" I shook my head. "That's Raymond Blake's firm, right? The one Paul always wanted to work for?" "Exactly that one." She handed me a mug. "They're looking for a secretary. It's not glamorous, but the pay's decent. And, well," she hesitated, "it could be a chance to, show him what he lost." I gave a small, humorless laugh. "I think I'd rather disappear than run into Paul." Julia raised an eyebrow. "You said he used to dream about that company. Imagine the look on his face if you ended up there." I smiled, the first real smile in days. "That's petty." She grinned. "It's therapy." That night, I sat with the job listing open on the screen. Secretary to Mr. Raymond Blake, CEO, Blake & Partners Investment Group. It wasn't the kind of position I'd ever considered, but at that point, pride didn't pay rent. I clicked apply. A week later, I got a call. The HR manager said they were impressed by my background. "A bit overqualified," she added, and invited me for an interview. When I hung up, I felt something flicker inside me that I hadn't felt since before Paul. A small, trembling spark of hope. The morning of the interview, I stood in front of the mirror, trying to decide which version of myself to wear. The tired, heartbroken woman who'd lost everything? Or the Elena who once commanded rooms full of analysts and spoke numbers like poetry? I chose the latter. Hair neatly tied, Simple blouse, gray skirt, no jewelry except my mother's silver earrings. My reflection looked older, sharper, but alive. The office was breathtaking, all glass and light, with quiet hallways that smelled of coffee and confidence. When I stepped into the waiting area, a woman smiled politely and asked me to wait. Then he appeared, Raymond Blake. I'd seen his photos in financial magazines, a man of power and precision. But in person, he wasn't intimidating the way I expected. There was something grounded about him, something calm. Mid-50s maybe, but with that kind of presence that made time irrelevant. "Elena Morris?" he said, offering his hand. His voice was low, warm, confident. "Come in." As I followed him into his office, I couldn't help but glance around. Everything was immaculate, floor-to-ceiling windows, framed awards, the skyline stretching beyond. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "So, Mrs. Morris, tell me why you're interested in this position." I hesitated. "I suppose because I need a new start, and because I believe I can bring something valuable, even in a role like this." He smiled slightly. "A role like this?" Heat rose to my cheeks. "I mean, it's not what I used to do. I worked in finance before, analysis, portfolio strategies." His eyebrows lifted. "You were in finance?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I left for personal reasons, but I understand the industry well." He leaned back, thoughtful. "I can tell." There was no judgment in his tone, just curiosity. He asked a few more questions, practical ones, then said, "We'll let you know by next week." When I left the building, I didn't dare hope. But the next morning, I got an email. "Dear Mrs. Morris, we are pleased to offer you the position of Executive Secretary to Mr. Raymond Blake." Julia squealed when I told her. "See, the universe is already on your side." Maybe. Or maybe the universe had finally stopped punishing me. That night, as I lay awake, I thought about Paul, about how he'd sneered that I had nothing. And yet somehow, in losing everything, I'd found something stronger, the quiet hunger to rebuild. "He doesn't get to end my story," I whispered again. "Not when I've barely started living it." The first morning at Blake & Partners felt like stepping into another universe, one where people walked faster, spoke quieter, and every click of a heel seemed to echo with confidence. I arrived 20 minutes early, clutching my new ID badge like it was an anchor. The receptionist smiled, guided me through a glass corridor, and handed me a folder labeled Confidential, Executive Office Procedures. Raymond's office was on the top floor, minimalist, spacious, with a panoramic view of the city skyline. Everything was in perfect order. No clutter, no chaos, the kind of place that reflected the man who owned it. When I entered, he was already there, sleeves rolled up, focused on a report. "Good morning, Mrs. Morris," he said without looking up. "Good morning, Mr. Blake," I replied. He gestured toward a stack of folders. "Our first challenge. These need to be reviewed and categorized before noon. Can you handle that?" There was no condescension in his tone, no test, just a direct question. "Yes," I said simply. By 10:30, the folders were done, sorted by client type, flagged for discrepancies, and summarized in a single-page report. Years of hidden work behind Paul's success had made this second nature. When Raymond returned from a meeting, he stopped at my desk. "You've finished already?" I nodded. "And I found a few inconsistencies in the quarterly summaries. They might be typos, but you should check." He raised an eyebrow, flipping through the pages. "You're right. These numbers don't match." There was a pause. Then he smiled. Not politely, but with genuine surprise. "Remind me again, you said you used to work in finance?" "Yes. I handled investment analyses before I took a break." He studied me for a moment. "A break or a sacrifice?" The question caught me off guard. "I suppose both." He didn't push further, just nodded, like he understood more than he let on. "Good work, Mrs. Morris." As he walked away, I realized how long it had been since anyone had said that to me. Good work, not you should be grateful. Days turned into weeks. I learned the rhythm of the office. Raymond's preference for black coffee at 8:45 sharp. His habit of scribbling formulas on napkins during lunch. His quiet way of thanking people when they thought he wasn't listening. He was demanding but fair, precise but human. And he noticed things, like how I triple-checked reports before handing them over, or how I never looked at my phone during meetings. One afternoon, he called me into his office. "Close the door, please." I did, heart thudding. He gestured toward the table where several binders lay open. "We're preparing a merger proposal. I want you to review the client portfolios and tell me if anything feels off." "Me?" I blinked. "I'm not—" "Just look," he said. "I have a feeling you'll see something my analysts missed." It felt strange to sit at that table again. Spreadsheets, valuations, all the language I used to love and had buried under years of marriage. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the pages, but within minutes, instinct took over. There, a misalignment in the risk ratios. Another, a forecast built on outdated data. Small details, but dangerous if ignored. I looked up. These projections are optimistic to the point of fantasy. They're hiding a liquidity gap. Raymond's expression shifted. Approval, curiosity, something more. That's what I thought. He leaned back in his chair. "How long has it been since you worked in finance, Mrs. Morris?" 15 years, I said quietly. "I left to help someone else build his career." He nodded slowly. "Then it's time to build your own again." That night, as I walked out of the building, the city lights shimmered against the glass towers. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small or invisible. I felt capable. Julia called while I was waiting for the train. "So, how's the new boss?" she asked, teasing. I smiled. "Intense, but fair. He's not like the others." "Oh?" she laughed. "Tall, powerful, mysterious. Not your type at all, huh?" "Stop," I said, though I couldn't help but laugh. "He's just—" I searched for the word. "Respectful." And that, more than anything, felt like oxygen. By the third month, Raymond started inviting me to sit in on meetings. "Just listen," he'd say, but I could see the way his eyes flicked toward me whenever a complicated number came up, waiting for my silent nod or shake of the head. One afternoon, after a tense board meeting, he said, "You should have been running that presentation." "I'm not an analyst anymore," I reminded him. He smiled faintly. "You will be, if you want to." I didn't know what to say. The idea of wanting again, wanting something, was still foreign. On a rainy Friday evening, as the office emptied, I stayed late finishing some reports. Raymond appeared in the doorway with his coat over his arm. "You should go home, Mrs. Morris." "I just have a few things left." He hesitated, then said quietly, "You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who worked twice as hard as everyone and got half the credit." I met his eyes. "What happened to her?" "She started her own firm," he said with a small smile, "and made everyone who underestimated her regret it." He left, and I sat there in the quiet office, the words echoing in my head. For the first time since my marriage ended, I didn't feel like I was trying to survive. I felt like I was preparing for something bigger. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered again, "He doesn't get to end your story." 6 months after I started working at Blake & Partners, my life felt almost unrecognizable. The woman who'd left her marriage with 2 suitcases was gone. I'd become Raymond's right hand, not by title, but by trust. He no longer needed to ask for second opinions. He'd simply slide a folder toward me, knowing I'd already found the flaws. I'd grown sharper, calmer, more deliberate. Each decision, each late night at the office, was a brick in the foundation of the new life I was building. Then one morning, Raymond called me into his office. He was standing by the window, phone in hand, the skyline glowing behind him. "Elena," he said, "I'll need you with me at the Investors Gala next week. It's mostly networking, but our competitors will be there, including Morris and Dalton." The name hit like a sting I hadn't felt in months. Morris and Dalton, I repeated. He nodded, unaware of the chill that ran through me. Their CEO, Paul Morris, is presenting. I'd like to hear what he's selling before we decide whether to partner or compete. Partner or compete? I almost smiled. If only he knew. Of course, I said evenly. I'll be there. The night of the gala arrived with the smell of expensive perfume and the murmur of polite power. The ballroom shimmered with glass chandeliers and golden light. Waiters moved like choreography, carrying champagne flutes between conversations that could shift millions. I wore a black evening dress Raymond had insisted was appropriate for the company's image. Simple, elegant, and the kind of silhouette I hadn't dared wear in years. My reflection before leaving the apartment had startled me. I looked alive. When we entered, heads turned. Raymond was the kind of man who filled a room without trying. I walked beside him, not behind, not as an accessory, but as someone who belonged there. Then I heard it. A voice I'd learned to recognize even when I wished I hadn't. Elena? I turned. Paul stood just a few feet away, glass in hand, the confident smirk already faltering. For a moment I saw flickers of the man I used to know, polished suit, charming smile, but there were new lines around his eyes and a heaviness that no amount of grooming could hide. Paul, I said simply. He blinked. You look different. Do I? I asked. It's amazing what peace can do for a person. He laughed awkwardly. Didn't expect to see you here. I work here, I said. His jaw tightened. Here? At Blake & Partners? Yes. I turned slightly, noticing Raymond walking toward us. This is Mr. Blake, my employer. Raymond shook his hand firmly. Pleasure to meet you. I've heard of Morris and Dalton. Paul nodded stiffly. Likewise. For the rest of the evening, I moved through conversations with practiced grace, but I could feel Paul's eyes on me. Watching, calculating, probably realizing that whatever version of Elena he remembered, the one who cried quietly while packing her bags, no longer existed. Later that night, as the crowd thinned, I slipped out to the balcony for air. The city stretched below, glittering, endless. Beautiful view, someone said behind me. I turned. It was Nellie. She looked just as young as I remembered, but not as carefree. Her makeup was perfect, her dress impeccable, but there was something brittle in her smile. Elena, she said softly. I didn't expect to see you here. Likewise. She hesitated, then stepped closer. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for what happened. I didn't understand back then. I studied her face. She wasn't mocking me. She looked tired, older somehow, despite the youth she once flaunted. It's fine, I said gently. You don't owe me anything. She shook her head. No, I do. I thought he was this successful, powerful man, but it turns out without you, he's nothing. He's been drowning at work, snapping at people, losing deals. I stayed quiet. She gave a small, sad laugh. He's so obsessed with keeping up his image that he doesn't even see how fast he's slipping. I think I made a mistake. I wanted to feel satisfaction, but all I felt was a strange kind of clarity. She wasn't my enemy. She was just the next woman he'd destroy to protect his own ego. Then learn from it, I said quietly, before he does the same to you. Her eyes softened. He already has. And with that, she walked away. Inside, Raymond found me again. Everything all right? Yes, I said, forcing a small smile. Just running into ghosts. He gave me a long, searching look. I've had a few of those myself. The trick is to stop letting them follow you. I looked at him, really looked. The calm strength in his eyes, the quiet understanding that came from his own scars. I think I'm learning how, I said. As the evening drew to an end, Paul came to say goodbye. You've changed, he said, almost resentful. Thank you, I replied. He frowned. That wasn't a compliment. Then you haven't changed at all? I said softly. His mouth opened, but no words came. I turned before he could find them. That night, when I returned home, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the window, watching the city lights blink like a living pulse. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt free. The past had finally seen me. Not broken, not begging, not invisible, but reborn. And for the first time since I'd left him, I smiled not out of pain, but peace. He doesn't get to end my story, I whispered again, because now I'm the one writing it. In the weeks that followed, the noise of Paul's collapse faded into the background of my new life. The newspapers wrote about financial mismanagement at Morris and Dalton, about an unnamed whistleblower who'd exposed discrepancies. They speculated, twisted details, searched for drama, but I didn't read past the headlines. I was done living in his shadow. Instead, my days were filled with meaning again. Raymond gave me more responsibility, not out of sympathy, but out of trust. I wasn't a secretary anymore. I was his strategic advisor, handling client portfolios, shaping decisions, even presenting at board meetings. It felt good. No, it felt right. Like I'd finally stepped back into the life I was meant to live all along. One Friday evening, Raymond appeared at my office door, jacket off, tie loosened. "Still working?" I smiled. "You sound surprised." "I shouldn't be." He stepped closer, resting a hand on the edge of my desk. "You've been running half the firm these days." "Only the boring half," I teased. He chuckled. "Nothing about you is boring, Elena." There was something different in his voice, softer, more personal. He hesitated, then said quietly, "Would you join me for dinner tonight? Off the clock." I froze for a heartbeat. We'd shared countless meals as colleagues, but this felt different. "Yes," I said finally. "I'd like that." The restaurant he chose was small, tucked away from the city noise, all warm wood and soft piano. Over candlelight, Raymond seemed almost younger. He told stories about his early years in business, his mistakes, his late wife. There was honesty in the way he spoke, no pretense, no masks. When he asked about my marriage, I didn't flinch. "It's strange," I said. "I spent so long trying to be what someone else needed that I forgot who I was. Now I'm still figuring that out." He looked at me with quiet admiration. "You know, I think that's what strength really is. Rebuilding without bitterness." I smiled. "I had good timing. You gave me a chance when no one else would." "I gave you a desk," he said gently. "You built everything else." That evening marked the beginning of something unexpected. We didn't rush. It wasn't fireworks, it was warmth. Steady, calm, real. He never tried to save me. He simply stood beside me while I saved myself. Months passed. We started spending weekends together, walks by the river, late breakfasts, sometimes just silence that didn't need filling. His children, both grown, met me and smiled with approval that felt honest. I never thought I'd fall in love again, but love with Raymond wasn't like before. It wasn't a storm. It was sunlight after rain. Meanwhile, Paul's name vanished from the business pages. Morris & Dalton was absorbed by another firm. He was dismissed quietly, with a tarnished reputation and empty promises of consulting work. Julia told me she'd heard he sold the house and moved into a small apartment. For a long time, I thought that when I reached this point, I'd feel triumph. But all I felt was closure. He had built his world on control and appearances. I had rebuilt mine on truth, and truth always outlasts illusion. One Sunday morning, Raymond and I sat on his terrace with coffee and sunlight pouring across the table. He looked at me for a long moment before saying, "Elena, have you ever thought about family?" The question hung in the air, delicate and dangerous. I looked down at my cup. I used to. But after the treatments failed, I tried to stop thinking about it. He reached for my hand. "There are other ways to build one, if it's something you still want." Something in my chest ached, not from sadness, but from hope. "I do want that," I said softly, "maybe more than ever." He smiled. Then let's start there. A few weeks later, we visited an adoption center together, not out of impulse, but out of a quiet, shared decision. Children's laughter echoed through the halls, pure and unguarded. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed that sound until it filled the room. A little girl with dark curls and curious eyes ran up to me, clutching a stuffed rabbit. She looked up, smiled shyly, and said, "You look like someone who knows stories." I knelt down. "Maybe I do. Would you like to hear one?" She nodded eagerly. As she spoke to me, about her favorite color, her favorite song, the rabbit's name, I felt something inside me unlock. A piece of my heart that had been locked away for years began to breathe again. When I looked at Raymond, he was already watching us, smiling. And for the first time, I saw a future that didn't hurt to imagine. That night, as I stood on the balcony of our home, I thought of the woman who had once driven into the rain with nothing but anger and pain. She didn't know that losing everything would be the beginning of freedom. "He doesn't get to end my story," I whispered, watching the city lights below. "Because my story isn't about him anymore." A year later, we stood in the small garden of the adoption center, holding hands. Raymond signed the final papers, and the little girl, Amelia, ran into my arms laughing. She smelled of vanilla cookies and sunlight. "Can we go home now?" she asked. I smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going home." Raymond's hand found mine. "Our home," he said softly. On the drive back, we stopped at a cafe near the park. While Amelia chased pigeons, I looked up and froze. Across the street, sitting alone with a half-empty cup, was Paul. He looked older, smaller somehow. His eyes lifted, and for a moment they met mine. No anger, no bitterness, just recognition. I nodded politely. He gave a faint, weary smile. That was all. No words needed. I turned back to Amelia, who was waving her little rabbit in the air, shouting, "Mom, look!" And in that single word, Mom, every wound in my heart finally healed. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she asked, "Will you tell me a story?" I smiled. "I'll tell you my favorite one, about a woman who thought her life was over, until she realized it was only beginning." Amelia's eyes fluttered closed. "Did she live happily ever after?" I looked toward the doorway, where Raymond stood watching us with quiet affection. "Yes," I whispered. "She finally did."
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and explore our channel for more love, betrayal, and redemption tales.